Welcome, everyone. Thanks, everybody, for your time and for joining us. For those of you who are new or didn't really know much about this, Farms.com has been involved in as a technology company for 24 years, really focusing on trying to help farmers get better information, better more timely managed information so they can improve their productivity, profitability, and more recently, sustainability. So about 9 years ago, we thought we saw this opportunity in the ag tech world, but there was a lot of noise and misinformation out in the market. So we thought, well, what better way to help the farmers to start our Precision Ag Conference? And so we started our Precision Ag Conference 9 years ago. It's small, it's grown from once a year to twice a year to much larger locations. But one of the things we realized as we progressed through here was that in order to make sure that we are involving everyone, we had to make sure that we touched on the opportunity for the students, the researchers that are involved in this and developing this new technology, and give them an incentive to continue to do this. So about 3 years ago, we started a scholarship for students involved in precision ag, especially on the focus on sustainability and profitability. And the scholarship is both in Canada, the US, and the UK. So we cover 3 different scholarships. Today we have our winner. It was I think we had about 10 kind of good applications, video presentations, and then we got down to 3, and then the final 3 were voted on by our audience here on Farms.com. And today we have our winner for the US, and that's Enrique Pena Martinez. Enrique's in his second year of his PhD program. Hopefully going to be done in another year, but he's going to tell us a little bit about his presentation and what his PhD is about. We talked a little bit more briefly about this with Denise about the kind of what's going on in sweet potatoes and as an undervalued potentially crop. But I see this also exact same scenario in carrots, what you're doing, Enrique. So I think that could be another great opportunity in another vegetable. Without further ado, I'd like to get Enrique to get started. So everyone, welcome Enrique, and looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Like he said, I am a second-year PhD student in electrical engineering. My background is in ag engineering, and I did a lot of work as a master's in cotton engineering. I did a lot of mapping, and now I'm focusing more into the world of phenotyping stuff. And so what do we mean by phenotyping? Phenotyping is understanding the physical characteristics of crops, right? So when we think about the length of sweet potatoes or the width of the sweet potatoes, right? The shape, is it curved? Is it not curved? Is it symmetrical? Those are phenotypes that as growers, we would like to understand better, because customers, the market of what they want is heavily fluctuated by the shape and size of sweet potatoes. All right. So as you can see in this image, the shape and size of sweet potatoes vary a lot, right? When we harvest the potatoes, they come in different shapes and sizes. And in the market, some people like smaller sweet potatoes, some people like bigger sweet potatoes. Me personally, I like the small sweet potatoes because they're easier to cook, they're easier to peel, and just easier to make dishes. But there are other markets where they prefer bigger sweet potatoes just because it's more product in one single potato, right? So there's a market for all kinds of shapes of sweet potatoes. Now, the suppliers And when I say the suppliers, I mean the farmers. When they harvest the potatoes, they have to somehow sort the sweet potatoes in different categories or different shapes and sizes, because the orders that they get correspond to the small sweet potatoes or the big sweet potatoes or the medium-sized potatoes, right? So they have a whole sorting process in already established, so that they can fulfill these orders in their own way. So just going over what the pipeline looks like. We first harvest the product, and by harvesting the product, this is how it looks like. You know, we have a truck coming by, sorry, not a truck, a tractor coming by, and it's lifting the potatoes out of the ground. And this is like the first sense that we get when we see the phenotypes of the potatoes, right? At this point, we still don't have a full picture of what is the distribution of those phenotypes, right? And so what we want to do is kind of like try to understand where in this pipeline we can start and, you know, implement a system where we can image or extract those phenotypes, right? So after the product is harvested, we then move the product into storage, right? So these are trucks coming in full of sweet potatoes, and they're coming from the fields and going into the storage warehouse, right? Okay, so then we store the product, and this is how it looks like. You know, they have warehouses full of potatoes, and this bins, you know, they all have different shapes and sizes. There's still a lot of ambiguity where the small and the big potatoes are, you know, and from here we then dump the product, right? So just kind of like showing you a little video of how it looks like. The way we dump the product is by taking a forklift, going into the warehouse, and then dumping it into what we call the dump tank. And in this dump tank, we then have it's like a pool where the sweet potatoes are washed, right? And then they go into the sorting step. And what the sorting step looks like is just a conveyor belt that kind of like lays out all of the potatoes in a single line or a single plane, where we can then see all of the potatoes. This is how it looks like. The dumping tank is on the other side of this. And from here, we then sort the potatoes out into different categories. All right. Okay. So up until now, what growers have is a system that can sort them out, but they don't know what the distributions of the different phenotypes are until this last step. So if I have an order of very like large sweet potatoes, and an X amount of sweet potatoes, I won't know if I'll be able to fulfill that order up until this step right here. Okay, so our idea is to leverage computer vision techniques so that we can scan the potatoes and extract their phenotypes, so we can help them fulfill their orders quicker, right? Because we're going to get orders, or farmers are going to get orders of small potatoes. They're going to get orders of larger sized potatoes. But it's not until that last step that I just showed you that they can fulfill those orders quicker. So what can we do with computer vision? So say, as a toy example, that we're getting 4 small potatoes, and then we have 2 large potatoes, and then this is 1 medium potato, right? And they're coming in, and we want to know which order we should fulfill first, right? So just by looking at this toy example, we know that we want to fulfill the order of small potatoes first, because we're going to have more of the small sweet potatoes coming in through the pipeline. And the way we do this and the way we can create that data for the farmers is by using computer vision, AI, right? And so just to put everything in one sentence, my goal is to inform producers how the shapes and sizes of sweet potatoes coming in through the pipeline look like. All right. So computer vision is a buzzword in the world right now. AI is another buzzword. But to put everything in a nutshell, what it looks like is this. Boom, where we have like an image. We just took an image, right? And we then pass it through an algorithm, and it creates these delineations around the potato, where we can then use that to extract information, phenotype information, that can then help the growers make decisions with that information. So this is how, this is the pretty picture. But in reality, what this looks like, and when we look at data, it looks like this. It looks like an Excel file where we have the phenotypes in different columns, and then each row corresponds to a different potato. So for example, if we look at this, let's look for 3. This 3 corresponds to potato number 3, and this is right here, right? So this potato would correspond to this row right here. And then we get all of this information with different phenotype information that will be able to aid growers in making their tough decisions. Okay, so so now we have a technique, but we now need to implement it into our industry partners' harvesting pipeline, so that we can then help them create that data, and then so that they can then use it. All right, so we have identified 2 places where we can implement this imaging system. We have when we move the product, and just as a reminder, we have, this is when the trucks are coming in from the fields all the way to storage. We have these trucks that are coming in full of sweet potatoes. And what we've done is we've implemented this mast system, or mast imaging system, where it's basically just like a big mast, and then there's like this rod on the top, and then on the top right here, what you see is just a camera, and that camera is just like a camera that's in your phone, except it can get wet, so it can be out there taking images. And in here we have a computer that is running an algorithm that triggers this camera whenever it sees motion. Okay, so when we have the trucks coming by, you'll see the camera will sense the trucks coming by, and it'll start taking images of those trucks, right? So just as an example, again, I'll show you how these images look like. It sends the truck, so it activates the camera, and then the camera starts taking pictures of these potatoes as they come by, right? And so we can then take all of those images of that truck, right, and create what we call an orthomosaic over here at the left, right, where it's just a composition of all of the images pasted together to create a really long image of a truck. And this is a very high resolution image. It's actually a very we can take this image and send it to the algorithm to create we can filter out the background and just leave the sweet potatoes, right? So we're then taking that top layer of potatoes, and we're sending it to the algorithm, the computer vision algorithm, and extracting the phenotypes from all of these potatoes. And then we can create this plot, right? This distribution plot, where we'll see that, okay, we have X amount of small potatoes here, we have X amount of mediums, large, extra large, and giants. So this is the end product, right? So this is what we want for the growers. So the growers will have this data, right? And this data will be associated with all of the bins in this truck, right? And so all of these bins are going to be stored in the warehouse, and whenever they need to fulfill an order, say for example, we want to fulfill an order that has a lot of large potatoes, we're then going to go to these bins, track these bins in the warehouse, and then go to the dumping process, because we know that we're going to have a larger amount of large in that bin. Okay, so that's the whole purpose here. So that is one imaging step. And you might think like, okay, but you're only imaging that top layer, right? You're only looking at these first layers. What about all of the potatoes that are underneath that? Well, we actually conducted an experiment where we did the same thing. We imaged different layers across that different bins, actually. So in one bin, we collected, here's the example. We collected, we took an image here, then we filled it up with more potatoes, put it here, took a picture, we filled it up with more potatoes, took another picture and filled it up with another potato, and and so on. And we were able to identify that the potatoes, or that the distribution of the potatoes across all the different layers looked very similar. So what does that mean? It means that we can take an image of just the top layer, and that is going to be representative of everything that is underneath that. So and this is just the statistical analysis that we did, right? So if everything is kind of like in the same line, right, then it means that we're looking at the same thing. Everything is part of the same distribution. Okay. So that is one system. Now let's look, what if we want to go a little bit further and actually image all of the potatoes that are within a bin, okay? And we have identified, that step between the dumping the product and then sorting the product, in that conveyor belt. And again, I'll just do a refresher where we have, we're dumping the product into, there's a bin here. That's a bin. It's dumping all of the potatoes into the pool, right? It's washing them out and then putting them in that layer. And then it's coming out on the other side like this, where we have all of the potatoes in one single line, one single plane, I'm sorry. And so what we're going to do here is install a system right here where we can take pictures of those potatoes as they're coming by, similar to the top bin. Imagine this is the truck. Now it's obviously a conveyor, but we're going to be taking pictures there and doing the same process. Well, what that will allow us is to gather even more data, right? And have an actual distribution of all of the potatoes that are going into sorting. Okay, so this is our system that we have set up. We have basically another camera. This is the same camera, and we just have some bars that we've put up there. And the way it's being triggered is by actually looking at the shaft of the conveyor. We have like we have a magnometer in there that's triggering every time the shaft turns one full cycle, and it triggers the picture every time it turns one. So it doesn't matter the speed of the conveyor belt, it's always going to take pictures in a specific order, right? Or like you're never going to miss any potatoes. That's basically it. So what does that look like? We have picture. This is one picture, for example, and what we are doing here is then after we take the picture, we send it to the algorithm. Again, we're looking at the phenotypes, and then once we get these phenotypes, this is what the user looks like, what the user sees, I'm sorry. And we can then create stuff like this, right? Where we're looking at all the data that's going in, and if this is doing like live information on what are the distributions of the phenotypes that we're seeing. So the purple points here correspond to like potatoes that are really small. You can see how it kind of like everything kind of like goes down, right? That just means that the potatoes were going, so here, for example, these are the small potatoes, as the potatoes go by, it just means that the small potatoes are fluctuating as they go into the system. I'll just play one more time. So see how it kind of like goes up. It means that we're getting more and more potatoes. So the blue ones correspond to the medium-sized potatoes, right? And so we can see how they change as they go through the system. And so imagine you being an operator, right? And when your job is to select which orders you can fulfill fast, right, or quicker, then you would want to fulfill probably the smaller size potatoes, because in this particular data that we're getting there, we have more of the smaller potatoes than the larger ones, right? So we want to we could be able to make a decision fast and say like, let's fulfill this order first compared to this other order. All right, and this is just another way of visualizing the same thing, where we have so this is a time series, right? So this would correspond to one bin, and then immediately after it would correspond to another bin being dumped, right? And the different colors correspond to different sized potatoes, all right? And so just to kind of like compare, like, why would you have like two systems, right? You have like one system in the truck, and then you have like another system right before sorting. And the whole point is to have better practices, not only in the sorting step, but also in the storage step. So if I know exactly what I'm storing, then it means that I can strategically place the bins inside the warehouse so that I can fulfill orders quicker again. And what I'm showing you here is just a demonstration, or like a comparison between the top bin distribution and the true bin distribution. So this is what we saw in the truck, and this is what we saw in between the dump tank and the sorting step, right? That last video with the conveyor belt. And you can see that by just sampling the top bin layer, we actually get very close results to what was actually underneath that, right? So again, this is very useful for farmers, because they can then just look at the top bin and have a very good confidence that what they saw in that first layer is what actually will be sorted out once they get to that final step. All right, this is just another example. You can see that the deviations are a little bit higher, right? This is like another truck, right? And you can see that, for example, in the extra large potatoes that we predicted, it wasn't actually that we found so many extra larges. There was just but still we get a good prediction on like the large potatoes, the medium-sized potatoes. There was just, it wasn't exactly completely perfect in the terms of like between extra large and giants, but at that point when you're trying to like separate between like extra large and giants, does it really matter? It becomes very subjective, right? So again, as a farmer, I would look at this and still be able to get some value out of that information. So the key takeaways from this whole project that I'm dealing with here is I'm trying to provide farmers the necessary phenotype data to help them make better decisions at fulfilling orders and improving their storage practices. And what we're doing is leveraging computer vision algorithms that can extract the phenotypes, right? So like length, the width, the weights. And we are doing this at a high throughput level, right? So at a macro scale, an industrial scale, right? And I think the most important thing here is that we are seeing what the benefits of AI in agriculture look like. And one of the biggest critiques to AI, especially in agriculture, is that sure, it's super cool to like, get so much data, and we can measure things and do all this stuff, but then how do I translate that to money, right? Like, so how is this helping me make um, better financial decisions, right? So if I don't get the investment back on what the technology costed, then what's the point of getting the technology in the first place? And so being able to reduce the time of operation, right? In sweet potato post harvesting operations, that equates to money right there, right? So with being able to fulfill orders quicker, that equates to money right there, because we'll be able to fulfill more orders. And one of the big things here is that we're doing this with sweet potatoes, but this is something that could be expanded to other crops as well. It just what we would have to tweak is looking at how the AI machines are detecting the crop, right? So what are we looking for? We would have to train the computer vision algorithm to look for whatever we're looking. So with that, if you have any questions, I'll be very glad to answer them. And again, thank you so much for spending the evening or the afternoon here with me. Yeah, if you have any questions, just shoot it out.
Thanks a lot, Enrique. Really appreciate it, and congratulations on your research here. I think you've got something really great coming on in this. I thought another benefit that maybe you didn't consider is fuel savings by strategically placing your product so it doesn't have to get moved as much. Would also be a fuel savings benefit, and probably an HR savings, fewer people required to move product. But we do have a couple questions here. So can the farmer use the data to determine which field zones are producing better potatoes? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, and that's actually something that we're looking at into this year and the following year now. We're incorporating GPS and RFID technology into our systems, so that way we can track where the different size potatoes are gonna be harvested in the fields. And so that way we can start making field maps on phenotype data from what we're seeing in the output. Yeah.
Perfect. That's exciting. We got another question, and I probably had this same kind of thought. So when you're measuring this, you're getting the physical size by its basically size, but are you able to get, how do you gather weight based on that? Is it kind of a extrapolation based on moisture to give you an idea of roughly what the weight is going to be? So by size, how do you do that?
So because we're sampling so many potatoes, what we did is we created like an empirical model that takes the pixels from the pictures that we're taking, right? And then we are ground truthing those pixels to obtain like inches, or like a measurement, right? So inches, millimeters, centimeters, and then from the pixels we can then create like a non-linear model. It's gonna be non-linear because we're talking about organics, but basically we're just fitting the data in a logarithmic scale to get the weights. So we had because we have so many potatoes, we can actually fit a very good model, and we do that by ground truthing techniques. So an empirical way of doing it. So we have the weights of a set amount of potatoes. We actually know the real weights. Then we take the images and create predicted weights, and we just fit that. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that. I'm not sure if we have any other questions. Does anybody else, any other participants have any questions? You can just put it into the chat area. So kind of where are you as far as the development on this, Enrique? Where do you see that? What's the next step here?
Yeah, so the next step right now would be to continue seeing how our system works, if how it does with time. We at this point we have gathered a lot of data. We have hundreds of thousands of images, and those images need to be they need to be processed, right? So similar to what the first question was asked, like how do you determine the field zones and producing better potatoes? That is like the goal, right? We want to be able to trace the potatoes back to the field. But first we need to understand, we want to have more varieties or more a wider spectrum of results to make a more robust product before we start doing that, right? So at this point, it's just kind of like repeat and rinse what you just saw in this presentation. Do it a lot of times with many different trucks, many different bins, and just kind of like get in a rhythm of doing that. We want to try to automate that process, and then we go into the field zoning the sweet potatoes.
Awesome. And I guess because I'm in the precision ag more on when it gets to the commercialization side of things, probably not necessarily something you thought about, but is there any modeling you're thinking about in determining kind of the cost saving, revenue saving efficiencies that might be realized through implementing this?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. So like, what are like the cost savings of like?
So if you're a producer and
Yeah,
you're starting to implement the system where we're able to model things better and get a better understanding of what our actual yield is and what we have as far as sizes and stuff like that. What does that turn and then generate into kind of revenue, time savings, all that stuff to determine into like, does this actually
right. Yeah. So that's like going into like into the economic model, right? Like how do we actually, and that's, what we're doing with our industry partner is determining that, right?
Yeah.
And they say, for example, even if it's like a 10% or a 5%, we're still talking about millions of dollars, right? So yes, it is. When we talk in that magnitude, implementing something like this that probably cost less than $50,000, it makes all the sense in the world.